Looking back, it's funny how little things start to change and somehow, at first, you just ignore them. I mean, Rachel and I were solid, or at least that's what I thought. We'd been together for years, and even with the usual ups and downs, I figured we were in it for the long haul. But then, right around the start of last year, things got strange. It all started when Rachel got back in touch with Lucas, an old friend from high school. I wasn't worried about it at first. I mean, we've all got people from our past that we still keep up with in one way or another. She'd mention him occasionally. Oh, Lucas said this, or Lucas shared that funny story. They'd talk about old memories, stuff from way back when, and I thought it was harmless. Honestly, I didn't think twice about it. But slowly, that casual nostalgia started creeping into our lives in ways I couldn't ignore. Suddenly, she's on her phone all the time, laughing at her screen like she's 16 again. She'd glance at me with that practiced look, the one that says, "I'm just chatting, don't worry about it." And every time I'd ask, "What's so funny?" she'd give me a nothing or just Lucas being Lucas. I was used to her sharing everything with me, but now it was like she had this little secret. The worst part was, she didn't even seem to care that I noticed. Around then, she started changing the way she looked too. Rachel was always beautiful to me, but now she was wearing makeup in a way she hadn't in years. She'd spend extra time getting ready in the mornings, fixing herself up like we were still in the early days of dating. One time, I even asked her, "Who are you getting all dressed up for?" And she brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "Can a woman feel good about herself?" But the real kicker was when she bought new clothes, stuff that didn't look anything like her usual style. Bolder, tighter, just not Rachel. And it wasn't like I could call her out on it without sounding like a jealous jerk. So I didn't say anything, though it tore me up inside. A few weeks into this strange transformation, I thought maybe I was just overreacting. So I suggested a night out with some friends, thinking it'd be good to reconnect and bring us back together. We met up with Trisha, an old friend of hers, along with some of my guys, Joe and Carl. We all grabbed a table, ordered drinks, and tried to act like everything was normal. Trisha noticed Rachel's new look right away. She raised an eyebrow, nudging her, and joked, "Well, don't you look like someone ready to hit the dating scene again?" She laughed it off, but I caught the way Rachel's face lit up. She looked like she was loving every second of the attention. Joe and Carl exchanged glances too, and I could feel their eyes on me, like they were silently asking if I knew what was going on. I had to force myself to laugh along, like I wasn't dying inside. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel's phone chimed, and she was on it in a heartbeat. She practically twisted away from the group, chuckling to herself as she typed. I didn't need to ask who she was messaging. I already knew. When we got home that night, I finally asked her, "So, what's up with Lucas? Seems like you two were talking a lot." She just shrugged, barely looking at me. "We're just catching up. Is that a problem?" The way she said it, it was like I was the one acting out of line. I could feel the frustration building, but I swallowed it down. "It's not a problem, Rachel. I just don't get why you're so distant lately." She rolled her eyes, muttering something about me being paranoid, and brushed past me on her way to the bedroom. I stood there, alone in the hallway, feeling like I'd just missed the exit off a road that was supposed to lead us somewhere good. A few more days passed, and I tried to push it out of my mind, but it felt like our whole life was slipping through my fingers. One night, I'm watching TV in the living room, and she suddenly announces she's going out for coffee. I almost choked. It was nearly 10 p.m., and she's telling me she needs coffee. I asked her if she was meeting someone, and she gave me that same cold look, saying, "Why do you care? I'll be back soon." Later, I found out it was Lucas she met that night. She must have been planning it for a while. According to her, they just had coffee and talked about the good old days. She had this way of making it sound innocent, but every time she came home after seeing him, she'd walk through the door with this stupid grin, looking like she'd just stepped off the pages of one of those romance novels she used to devour. Then one night, I caught her on the phone with him. She didn't know I was listening. I was supposed to be asleep, but something made me wake up, and I saw her sneaking off with her phone. I followed, standing just outside the door. Her voice was soft, almost dreamy. She giggled, whispering something I couldn't quite hear, and I knew right then that whatever they had wasn't just catching up. There was a crackling energy between them, something I hadn't felt from her in a long time. She was slipping further away from me, caught up in some fantasy with Lucas, while I was just left standing in the shadows, wondering where the hell I went wrong. It was that night when I realized that my marriage, the life we'd built together, was probably over. I just didn't know how much worse things would get. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, all the signs were there. But when you're in the thick of it, when you're telling yourself that the woman you married would never betray you like that, it's easy to let things slide. After that night, when I overheard her talking to Lucas, things got worse. She was glued to her phone, messaging him constantly. She'd keep it close, like it was some prized possession she couldn't bear to let go of, and anytime I got close, she'd tilt it away or slide it into her pocket. It was like she was putting up this invisible wall between us, one that got a little higher every day. I tried to ignore it at first, told myself it was work stress, maybe even a midlife crisis. But deep down, I knew better. She was pulling away, and I was losing her. When I finally asked her about it, she gave me this speech about needing time for herself. She said she wanted to explore new projects and maybe attend a few business meetings here and there. Rachel? Business meetings? I'd never known her to take an interest in anything like that. She'd always been content in her own little bubble, never the type to seek out big plans or ambitions. So yeah, that excuse hit me as strange, but I didn't call her out on it. I kept it to myself, watching her slip further away. Things really started to change at work too. Liz, a longtime colleague who'd known me for years, noticed something was off. She kept dropping these comments like, "You don't seem like yourself lately, Nate," or "Is everything okay at home?" One day, when we were getting coffee, she finally came out and asked, "Is Rachel doing all right?" I just get this sense. I don't know, but I feel like you've been distant, and sometimes that happens when something's wrong with a spouse. That hit like a sucker punch. I wasn't about to spill my personal life to Liz, but her words gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was onto something. It wasn't just me noticing anymore. Other people could see the toll this was taking on me. Eventually, I confided in Carl, one of my closest friends. I told him everything. How Rachel was acting strange. How she kept her phone close. How she was constantly busy with her so-called projects. Carl looked at me with that hard, serious look he gets when he's thinking things over, then said, "Look, Nate, I know a guy. Private investigator. I used him a few years back, and he was solid. If you're looking for answers, this guy could help you out." A private investigator. I couldn't believe I was even considering it. But with every day that passed, with every excuse Rachel threw at me, I knew I needed to do something. Still, I hesitated. It felt so damn drastic. Yet, I knew that if I didn't do something soon, I'd be left in the dark while she carried on with whatever this was. Then, one afternoon, I found a concert ticket in her purse. She was out, and I was looking for some spare change when I saw it, tucked right next to her wallet. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting. Rachel had never shown any interest in going to concerts. Hell, she'd always complain about how loud they were, saying the whole scene wasn't her thing. And here was this ticket, proof that she was planning something I knew nothing about. I flipped it over, my heart racing, and sure enough, it was for a band Lucas had once told her he liked. I put it back, feeling my hands shake with a mix of rage and helplessness. She was planning to go to this concert with him. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just talking to Lucas. They were meeting up, seeing each other, sharing moments that should have been ours. That night was the turning point. She went to take a shower, and I finally did what I'd been avoiding for weeks. I grabbed her phone. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, and my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I knew her password. She hadn't bothered to change it, probably assuming I'd never look. The first message I opened was from him. It wasn't even subtle. They'd been reminiscing, yes, but they'd moved far beyond that. They were talking about plans, places to meet, places they'd gone already. I scrolled back, finding messages I hadn't wanted to believe existed, birthday greetings, jokes that only two people with history would get, and then the real kicker, a picture of some jewelry. He'd given her a gift, something small and delicate, a necklace she'd never worn around me. I felt sick. I could barely breathe as I kept scrolling, seeing how they'd both let this little reconnection grow into something way beyond what I'd imagined. I could see it all so clearly now, the way she'd smile at her phone, the laughter, the distance she kept between us. It was all because of him. When she came out of the shower, I shoved the phone back in its place and tried to act normal. But she must have seen something in my face because she gave me this look, a look that was half curiosity, half annoyance. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, like I was the one acting strange. "Nothing," I muttered, forcing myself to sound casual. "Just a long day." I was boiling inside, but I didn't want to confront her. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step away from a fall that would change everything. The anniversary dinner couldn't have come at a better time. Rachel's parents were throwing this big party, a whole celebration of love thing, inviting family, friends, and practically anyone who'd ever shared a moment with them. The irony of the whole situation wasn't lost on me. Rachel's folks, blissfully unaware, hosting a party to celebrate their enduring love, while their daughter was out here destroying our marriage behind my back. It was too perfect an opportunity to pass up. I'd already made my plan by then. Confronting her in private wouldn't have the same impact. It'd be too easy for her to twist things around, play the victim, make me out to be the jealous husband. But in front of family? Friends? People who respected her parents and knew us as the happy couple? No, that would hit her where it hurt most. So I gathered every scrap of evidence. Screenshots of her messages with Lucas, photos of them together, the ticket stubs, the jewelry. I saved it all on my phone, ready to show the world just who Rachel really was. The night of the celebration, I played my part. We drove over in silence, her lost in her own little world, while I kept my emotions bottled up, pretending I was just as excited for the evening as she was. When we arrived, her parents greeted us with the usual hugs and smiles, none the wiser. The house was packed, cousins, aunts, uncles, old friends, all happy, mingling around the buffet and pouring drinks. Rachel's sister, Fiona, even came over to give her a quick hug and shot me a curious look. I'd always gotten along with Fiona, and there was this silent understanding between us that Rachel was, well, Rachel. I kept my distance from her all night, watching her charm the crowd. She was the same Rachel as always, laughing, smiling, putting on that picture-perfect act she'd mastered over the years. But I wasn't the only one who noticed something was off. At one point, Fiona cornered me in the kitchen. "All right, what's going on with you two?" she asked, her voice low, but full of concern. "You look like you're here to bury someone, not celebrate." I gave her a half-smile, feeling the weight of the truth pressing on me. "Let's just say it's going to be an interesting night, Fiona. Trust me, you'll see soon enough." She raised an eyebrow, clearly not understanding, but she nodded and went back to the crowd. Finally, after dinner, everyone gathered around for dessert. The room was buzzing with laughter and warmth. Rachel's parents were sitting at the head of the table, beaming at each other, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I stood up, cleared my throat, and raised my glass, calling for a toast. "First of all," I began, "I want to thank you, Robert and Linda, for showing us all what true love and commitment look like. You two have set a high bar, and we're all lucky to have your example to follow." Everyone clinked their glasses, nodding in agreement. Rachel sat across from me, her face glowing, probably thinking this was going to be another standard speech about love and loyalty. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. So I continued, feeling the tension building. In honor of loyalty and trust and the promises we make to each other, I want to talk about what those words actually mean. My eyes locked onto Rachel's. She started shifting in her seat, a nervous smile playing on her lips. She knew something was coming but had no idea what. "See," I said, "trust is a fragile thing. And when you find out that trust has been broken, especially by the person you believed in the most, well, it hits hard." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, some looking confused, others catching on to the tension. Rachel's smile faltered. "Nate, what are you talking about?" She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. I took out my phone, unlocked it, and held it up. "I think everyone deserves to know who you really are, Rachel." I opened the messages, scrolling through her and Lucas's exchanges, and let everyone see it. The laughter stopped. The room, once warm and filled with celebration, grew cold in an instant. A few people gasped. Her mother covered her mouth, her father's face went blank, and Rachel sat there, stunned, unable to process what was happening. I went through the photos too, swiping through images of her meeting Lucas, the jewelry, the concert ticket. All of it was right there, undeniable proof of her betrayal. The silence was broken by Fiona's voice. "Rachel, is this true?" Her tone was a mix of disgust and satisfaction, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Fiona never outright hated her sister, but there was always a rivalry, and seeing Rachel's perfect little life fall apart was, well, satisfying for her. Rachel tried to stammer out an excuse, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just old friends catching up. But the proof was right there, glaringly obvious to everyone. Her parents just sat there, stunned, their faces a mix of confusion and hurt. And then Fiona, unable to resist the moment, chimed in with a brutal jab. "Guess all that time you spent obsessing over your image and your perfect life led you here, huh, Rachel?" Her words cut through Rachel like a knife. She tried to defend herself, but the damage was done. Everyone saw her for who she was, and there was no talking her way out of it. Her cousin John joined in, his voice full of disdain. "We always knew you were full of yourself, Rachel. But this, with a married man? Your parents must be so proud." I could see Rachel shrinking, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to hide. The entire room had turned against her. Unable to take any more, she stood up and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. The truth was out, and she had to face it alone. I didn't follow her. I didn't feel the need to. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. That night, I stayed a while longer, talking with people who came up to me, some offering apologies, others quietly nodding in support. It was a strange, surreal experience, the end of one life and the start of something new. As I left, I looked around the room one last time, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel's carefully crafted world had finally crumbled, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. After that night at the anniversary dinner, everything changed. News of Rachel's affair spread like wildfire. Friends, family, even her professional circles, they all knew. It wasn't just whispers either. People outright avoided her. I didn't expect it to hit her that hard, but it was brutal to watch her reputation fall apart. She'd built this image of herself over the years. Professional, trustworthy, the kind of woman who had it all together. Now, all of that was crumbling in front of her, one piece at a time. Within a week, I started hearing from mutual friends, people who'd known us for years who wanted to let me know they had my back. Trisha and Carl, two of her closest friends, started keeping their distance from her. Carl, in particular, was vocal, saying he couldn't respect anyone who'd betray their marriage like that. Joe, another mutual friend, publicly made a point about infidelity, saying it went against his values. And Rachel knew all of this. Every time someone turned their back on her, it was another blow. It wasn't just her personal life that was affected either. Rachel's clients started bailing on her too. People had trusted her, valued her work, but now they couldn't look at her the same way. Some outright refused to work with her. She tried to explain it to me once, saying that things just aren't the same in her field, but I didn't need an explanation. I knew it was because of the scandal. She tried finding new clients, new partners, but people weren't as willing to put their trust in her. The whole thing left her in a financial mess. She'd relied on those clients, on those connections she'd carefully built, and now they were all slipping away. I'd see her trying to keep it together, her smile faltering, the worry lines deepening on her face, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. She'd made her bed. Meanwhile, something else unexpected was happening. Fiona. After the chaos of the anniversary dinner, Fiona reached out to check on me. I'd known her for years, obviously, but this was different. She'd seen everything that happened with Rachel and Lucas, and she had this way of talking to me that was warm. She understood what I was going through, and that was something I needed more than I realized. We started talking more. She'd send a quick text, checking in to see how I was holding up, or she'd drop by with some excuse to chat. I'd never looked at her this way before, but there was a new side to her I hadn't noticed. She was empathetic, supportive, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was actually on my side. One night, she suggested we grab dinner. Just to talk, she said. I didn't think much of it, She was Rachel's sister, after all, and I figured it was more for family solidarity than anything else. But when we sat down together, there was this ease, a natural connection that felt completely different from anything I'd felt with Rachel in years. Over dinner, she listened as I vented about everything: the humiliation, the anger, the emptiness Rachel had left behind. Fiona just nodded, letting me get it all out, her eyes never leaving mine. At one point, she leaned across the table and put her hand on mine, saying, "You deserve better, Nate. You really do." There was a warmth there, something comforting and real, and I realized I hadn't felt like that in ages. After that night, we started meeting more often. I didn't plan on it becoming anything more, but I couldn't deny the way I felt when I was with her. She made me feel wanted, needed in a way that Rachel never had. Fiona understood me, she respected me, and that feeling became addictive. Gradually, those dinners turned into more. We tried to keep things in check, to be just friends, but there was something inevitable between us. One night, after another dinner and a few too many glasses of wine, we crossed that line. It wasn't just about revenge on Rachel, though that thought did cross my mind. It was real, and it was exactly what I needed. Fiona and I didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. It just felt right. Of course, we weren't the only ones who noticed what was going on. When word got out to the family, all hell broke loose. Rachel and Fiona's parents didn't take it well. Her mom cornered Fiona at a family gathering, hissing accusations, saying she betrayed her sister, ruined the family bond, that kind of thing. Fiona tried to explain that Rachel was the one who'd wrecked our lives first, that I needed someone, and that she was there to help me heal. But their mother wasn't having any of it. To her, this was unforgivable. Naturally, it only made things worse between Rachel and the family. Cousin John, who'd already been disgusted by her betrayal, sided with Fiona, saying that Rachel brought this on herself. Fiona and I became something of a family scandal. People talked, and support for Rachel grew even weaker. The irony wasn't lost on me. She tried to destroy our marriage, and now her actions were breaking apart her family too. At first, I questioned what I was doing with Fiona. I wondered if it was really fair, if I was being impulsive, maybe even vindictive. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Fiona wasn't just a rebound. She was the person I needed, someone who understood, who knew the betrayal, and wanted to help me pick up the pieces. And slowly, being with her stopped feeling like a reaction and started feeling like a choice. Rachel, meanwhile, was left alone in the fallout. She tried to reach out to her old friends, tried to explain herself, maybe even spin the story to make herself look like the victim. But nobody was buying it. Everyone had seen the evidence, heard the stories, and they weren't going to forget anytime soon. After the dust settled from Rachel's public humiliation, it was time to face the inevitable divorce. I wanted this whole mess over with, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with more than she deserved. Fortunately, I had Max. We'd known each other for years, and if there was one thing I knew about him, it was that he was relentless. Max wasn't just a good attorney. He was the guy you called when you needed someone to tear through the opposition with a grin on his face. I figured if anyone could get me a clean break from Rachel, it was him. We met up over drinks, and I laid everything out for him, from the messages with Lucas to the family drama at the anniversary dinner. He didn't flinch, just sat there, nodding and scribbling down notes. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Nate, we've got her. She's left a trail of evidence a mile long. With all this, we can ensure she gets as little as possible." Max was clear on his plan. We'd present her affair as a severe breach of our marriage. In court, it would give us leverage to argue that she'd forfeited any right to our shared assets. I had my business to protect, too. Max knew every angle, every argument we could use to cut her off from any future claim to my income. And the way he laid it all out, I knew he meant business. I was finally going to get some justice. Rachel, on the other hand, wasn't going to let go without a fight. She went looking for help, someone who'd take her side and, no doubt, paint me as the bad guy. But after everything that had happened, most of her friends wanted nothing to do with her. Eventually, she turned to her younger sister, Zara. They'd always been close, though Zara had stayed mostly out of the chaos between Rachel and me. But apparently, family ties ran deep, because Zara was willing to go all in to help her sister fight back. Zara pushed Rachel to find an attorney who'd take her case and go after our assets with everything they had. When I got wind of it, I almost felt a twinge of respect for her persistence. But when it came down to it, they were no match for Max. Every argument they threw at us, Max countered with hard evidence. He brought out the messages, the photos, and detailed every secret meeting Rachel had with Lucas. Her attorney tried to paint me as bitter, someone out for revenge, but Max shut him down at every turn. In court, Rachel's case fell apart piece by piece, and there was nothing they could do to salvage it. The final ruling left Rachel with almost nothing. She lost rights to most of our shared assets, the car, the home, and any previous investments we'd made together. I got the business and a clean break from her, free from any financial obligations to her in the future. The judge saw her infidelity as a significant breach, just as Max had predicted, and Rachel was left empty-handed. I watched her face during that final ruling. For the first time, I saw something like panic cross her features. She knew she was in free fall, and there was no one to catch her. Reality hit her hard and fast after that. She had to move out of our home, sell off some of her things just to stay afloat, and find cheaper accommodations. Her reputation was already in shreds from the scandal, and with clients bailing left and right, her financial situation was looking grim. She tried to pick up new work, tried to salvage whatever she could, but her name was now tied to a story that no one wanted to touch. Former clients stopped trusting her, and word spread fast. She was radioactive, and I could see it was eating her alive. In her desperation, she even reached out to Lucas, hoping he'd be her lifeline. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. The guy she'd wrecked our marriage for was suddenly her last hope. But, as fate would have it, Lucas didn't want anything to do with her either. When she asked him for help, he apparently told her, "I didn't sign up for this mess." He cut her off, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. She'd burned everything we had for him, and now he was nowhere to be found. Without her friends, her lover, or even her family fully on her side, Rachel was left in a tight spot. The only person who stuck around was Zara, though even she was pulling back. She had her own life to think about, and Rachel's drama was starting to weigh on her too. Every now and then, I'd hear from mutual acquaintances about how Rachel was struggling, how she was barely making ends meet, trying to hold on to the last shreds of her dignity. But for me, the divorce marked the end of that chapter. I was done. The wreckage Rachel had caused was now hers to deal with, and I walked away with a sense of closure. It wasn't just about the financial win or even seeing her lose everything. It was about finally being free. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices, and I was finally able to move on. After the divorce, something shifted in me. It was like I could finally breathe again, freed from the mess Rachel had made. I threw myself into work, focusing on my business, and without the constant weight of our failing marriage dragging me down, things started to click into place. Projects I'd put off, clients I hadn't had time for, all of it became my focus. And slowly my business began to grow. I started meeting with other entrepreneurs, building connections, attending more events. At one of these events, I met Amelini. She wasn't someone you could ignore. She had this energy about her, like she knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. We started talking business, sharing ideas, and before I knew it, we were discussing partnerships. Her drive was magnetic, and I could tell she was someone who could see the big picture, someone who wouldn't get caught up in petty distractions. Working with her was like a breath of fresh air. My relationship with Fiona, meanwhile, started to cool. We'd had something real in the beginning, or at least it felt like it, but over time I realized it was more about both of us trying to make sense of the mess Rachel had created. There was something comforting in that shared pain, but as the months passed, it became clear that our relationship had served its purpose. We ended things on good terms, deciding to stay friends. Fiona got what she needed, too. Maybe a sense of proving herself after years of feeling overshadowed by Rachel. But we both knew it was time to move on. With the divorce final and my life moving forward, I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen much of during my marriage. Trisha invited me to a few social events, and Joe and Carl were there too, reminding me of the life I'd had before everything went sideways. It felt good, and gradually I started feeling open to the idea of meeting someone new. That's when Amelini and I began seeing each other outside of work. She was different, confident, sharp, with this way of seeing things that was completely refreshing. One night, after a business dinner, we ended up talking for hours, realizing we had more in common than I'd thought. We shared stories, laughed, and somehow, the night turned into something more. What started as a business partnership began to grow into something real, something I hadn't expected but welcomed all the same. Meanwhile, Rachel was dealing with the aftermath of her choices. Her life had spiraled since the divorce. Without stable income or the support she once relied on, she was forced to move into low-cost housing, taking whatever work she could find to keep herself afloat. She tried to rebuild her life, but her reputation was in shambles. The scandal still hung over her, and people weren't quick to forget. Old friends had moved on, clients didn't want to work with her, and she was left trying to piece things together alone. The only one who still stayed in touch was Zara, though even she was pulling back. She had her own career to think about, and she couldn't afford to be dragged down by Rachel's issues. Rachel was left with nothing but the regrets that haunted her. She'd made her choices, and now she was stuck with the consequences. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing she was finally facing reality, a reality she'd tried so hard to escape by wrecking our marriage. As for me, life took on a new rhythm. My business with Amelini was thriving, expanding faster than I'd imagined, bringing both financial stability and a sense of purpose. I felt like I was finally back on track, finally at peace. Amelini and I grew closer, and being with her made me realize just how much I'd let slip during my marriage to Rachel. With Amelini, I had a partner in every sense of the word. She was someone who respected me, who shared my drive, and who was there for me without any hidden agendas. Looking back on everything, I realized I'd grown from the experience. Rachel's betrayal was painful, but it forced me to see what I wanted, what I deserved. It taught me to be stronger, to value the people who truly stood by me. I'd left the worst behind, and I was ready to build a life that was honest, fulfilling, and free from the shadows of the past. I guess, in the end, Rachel's betrayal was the best thing that could have happened to me. It pushed me to redefine my life, to find people who genuinely cared, and to finally move forward. I had a future I was excited about, and for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace it.